So to get started, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into painting?
I always made art as a little girl. I grew up with a father who was an architect, but he had lots of art supplies around the house, so pastels, watercolors, and he was always drawing and designing and planning things, projects around the house, so I just naturally gravitated towards that. As I got older and found that I was even more interested in doing it in school and outside of school, I just kept pursuing it. And then when it came to where to go to college, I thought that I would be happiest in art school. I just really couldn't think of doing anything else. So that was how I ended up going to art school. And then while I was there, started out in illustration, quickly found out that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And then I switched to the painting department. Found out that wasn't quite what I wanted to do either, so I went to printmaking, but when I graduated, I went to painting full time and I kept painting. I moved to New York after I graduated, and I worked for a gallery there that was known for showing abstract expressionists from the 50s and 60s. That was Betty Parsons' gallery. And painting was first and foremost there. So I was around a lot of painters. It was also the time in New York when a lot of neo-expressionism was happening, and I just absorbed everything around me. So painting was just something I really love to do. I still find it relevant, and I still think there's a lot more to say with it.
Now I know that you've worked with Glazes, especially for this series. Mm-hmm. So what is it like to work with Glazes?
I went to Rome for a year in my during college. I was a junior year bride program, and while I was there I just looked at all the painting I could possibly see, and I was really influenced by the Renaissance artists and their technique of glazing, using transparent colors to bring out the depth and the richness of the colors. As I continued to paint and work on my own work, I realized that was a way to increase luminosity and the depth of the color, and I felt as if making a painting over a period of time rather than in one sitting gave it a depth of feeling that you couldn't get from one sitting. So I continued to paint that way. I also really love doing watercolors, and so painting with transparent glazes allowed me to continue to use that technique of using many layers of transparent color to build up form and composition.
Now, what is your process as far as like getting ready for shows?
Getting ready for shows. Well, I can use this one as an example. This is when I found out I was going to have a show here. I first visited the space and just got a feel for the walls and the dimensions and what I could possibly do here. I immediately felt a sense of the symmetry of the space and the fact that it was almost a cube. And then I started to realize there was something else about it. It was very serene, very quiet. And I found out from the gallery director that it had been a former chapel. And then I immediately started to think of things that connected to in my own life. So the combination of that and then my own interest in trees led me to do the Stations of the Cross. So I had seen Barnett Newman's Stations of the Cross about 25 years ago, and was really compelled by this idea of a contemporary artist doing abstract paintings that are related to a very traditional theme. And I researched that a little bit, and I found out other artists had done that, so I thought this might be a really rich source of inspiration for this show. So I started to do sketches. I came back here, I looked to see how many paintings could possibly fit in. I measured the walls, I thought about painting sizes and dimensions, and then I started doing sketches, and then I do watercolor studies that are the same scale but much smaller. And I also started looking for tree imagery. I've always used trees in my work, and I really felt like that would be a really potent vehicle for this expression. They're abstract yet natural. They're part of the environment that we experience every day, and they also can contain a lot of emotion and feeling. Then I transfer those to the larger paintings, and then I go through the process of gessoing the panels, many layers of gesso, and then about 40 layers of paint, of transparent paint. So that's it in a nutshell.
One of your pieces actually intrigued me, the one with the silver flecks in it.
Uh-huh.
So,
which one are you talking about?
The one's over there with the
Okay.
stripes. So, when working with metallics, how is the process with that, just finding the right?
That was a challenge. I don't normally paint with just a few colors, but when I saw this exhibition and this body of work in my mind, I kept seeing a very muted palette, a very limited palette of whites and grays and creams and browns and maybe a little bit of black, but mostly on the lighter side. And yet I also saw this metallic, and I'm not quite sure why. It was just compelling, and I wanted to include it. I think stylistically it balances against all of the earth colors, all the browns and the warm colors. It's cold, it's a little bit mechanical, metallic. It's more of like a built environment rather than the natural environment. So I set about to incorporate it. It doesn't work quite the same as the oil paints that I was using for the rest of the colors. It's very hard to make a transparent layer of metallic paint. Depending on what direction you see it from, it could look light, it can look dark. Sometimes the brush strokes show, and sometimes it just gets completely flat. So I had a bit of a learning curve, and it was challenging, but I was certainly up for the challenge, and that made working on these paintings somewhat more exciting, because I felt like that increased perhaps the abstract nature of them. It sort of took them out of the real world and brought them into this other alternative universe.
So why do you do series instead of just individual paintings?
I do series because I like to work on a particular theme for a while. I like to research it. I like to find all the different ways that I can approach it and look for different perspectives in thinking about it. There's many things about the series that connect from one to the next, and I also look for those commonalities. But doing something on a particular theme gives me a chance to also reach beyond what I've been doing and reach a little bit further and scare myself a little bit, take a little bit of a risk. So it's just an opportunity to look at the world in a slightly different way. And for this particular series, to do something that other artists have done, to follow in that tradition and see how my work fits into that context.
So how did nature become your inspiration, and has it always been your inspiration?
That's a really good question. It hasn't always been my single inspiration, but it's always been there. I think growing up in Southern Ohio, I spent a lot of time outdoors, like the better part of, all summer outdoors, and just coming in to sleep and to eat. And I grew up with a mother and father who really loved being outdoors too, and allowed us opportunities to spend time outside and to go fun places where we could be in rivers or in forests or mountains, things like that. And I just love the way the universe works. I just want to figure it out, and by painting it, there's an attempt to understand it. And because it envelops us, it's part of us, we're in it every day, it's just a constant inspiration. Just going outside, I see things that I want to include in my work. It became more, I lived in New York for 6 years. I have to say it was probably not as important there, although I have to say when I was there, I also was looking for the weeds growing between the buildings and the ooze coming down the subway walls. I was always looking for how nature was conquering this city. It would never win, of course, but once I moved to Colorado, it took hold big time, and I saw more things outside. I made trips to be outside, hiking trips, and into the mountains, and I was able to even embrace it even more. So then it became a much bigger part of my work, And I'm really glad that I was able to come here and have that all around me all the time.
Do you feel that there's anything special that people should know about not only you as an artist, but your exhibition here at Regis?
It's a big question. I think the reason I did this wasn't to be so, I didn't want to tell the actual story. I wanted to use a story as a kind of universal story, kind of a parable for our times, and that my work has often taken the form of a journey, whether it's, I did 100 paintings for 100 years of Rocky Mountain National Park, and that was kind of about being immersed in this park and taking these hikes and seeing these moments of nature and inspiration along the way. And this could also be a journey. We all have personal journeys. We all have things we have to carry with us. We accept help from other people. We reach some sort of point at the end that hopefully is resolution or some sort of culmination. And we fall down and we get back up. I mean, so there's a lot of things about it that came to me after I was painting it that I found sort of interesting, the parallels with my own life, but also how it relates to the world in general.
Thank you for coming in today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed talking to you today.
I enjoyed being here. Thank you.